Welcome to Season 2 of Malevolent Autopsy. I'm your host, Queen. I use she, her pronouns, and before we go any further than that, let me warn you, this show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the date this episode is published. We're going to dissect the patron votes that drive the story week to week, so grab your scalpel and let's begin the autopsy. I am here with Vol Control. Welcome, Vol.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me on again.
Would you like to tell me what part of Arthur's body you control and what pronouns you use?
Yes. I use he, him pronouns, and this week I am controlling Arthur's visual cortex, which is the part of the brain that allows you to have visuals in dreams.
Ooh, that's really cool.
Which I assume Arthur does have control of versus his optical nerves, which John has.
Right, yes. So technically, it's not I have your eyes, Arthur, it's I have your optical nerves, Arthur.
Yeah. To get really technical about it, it doesn't have the same like ring to it, but yeah, that is the technical part that he controls.
Bird in the chat says, did y'all know that prior to color TV, people dreamed in black and white? So That's interesting.
Is that true?
I don't know. Probably. Probably some people did.
Fascinating.
I also know another cool fact about dreams, because I guess that's what we're doing this episode. You cannot make faces in dreams. Every face you see in your dream you have seen before.
Yeah. Which is why is it the have you seen this man creepypasta? That's the Hat Man, right?
That's the Hat Man, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got to exist out there somewhere, right?
Yeah, Hat Man real.
Or that's the reason that he's scary, is because he is a face that no one's ever seen before.
Right, of course, I'm sure. Would you like to give us our chapter summary, Vol?
Put summary in heavy quotations, because there were so many things that came up, and I didn't feel like I could skim over a lot of them, so hear me out. Chapter 254. It's only 11 minutes long, but we've got another doozy. Arthur swears he trusted Antoine from the start, but Scratch starts taunting him about abandoning him and about the fire that is sure to die. We learn that Scratch has freed Alia of her suffering in life by trapping her in a nightmare. Flashback to Antoine, distressed, trying to free Alia from the roots that bind her sleeping form. He reveals that Alia seemed to know she would not wake and gave the map to him the previous night. Arthur asks to know their destination, and John has to talk him down from a tantrum when Antoine refuses. He says only that if the Blackstone is used, everything will end. As they resolve to keep moving and leave Alia behind with supplies enough to survive if she should wake, Antoine discovers Alia left Arthur one last message on her slate. Returning to the present, Stretch confirms that Antoine too shares the nightmare. Arthur calls her a murderer, which is rich coming from him, and she does have a good laugh at that, and she reminds him of how utterly insignificant humankind is, mere ticks sucking the life out of the earth. She promises to free him, with murder, presumably, so less than ideal, if only he gives her the stone. She presents us with no other option.
I love that. I also specifically wrote down that ticks line because that was such a good line.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that whole, like, soliloquy or, like, monologue was really, really good. And I love addressing the insignificance of humanity as, like, a theme in media like this. And so I was just vibrating. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I think that all of Lilith's dialogue here, it was poetic. It was so artful, and I think that might be one of my questions for, like, question drafts, because I always make a bunch of drafts of the Malevolent Q&A questions that we get to do during InvictusCon. And one of my questions might be, these big, beautiful chunks of prose that you write, do you do it all in one go? Do you like just sit down and that just comes out of you, or do you have to like refine it? Was it longer? How many drafts do you do? I have this feeling, because Harlan is such a unique and wonderful and enviable personality who is just like, yeah, I don't practice. I didn't take any formal training. I'm just really good at this. Like,
well, I mean, he has been doing, I would say, dramatic improv for 10 years through the Invictus stream, you know.
That's true.
Both as the gamekeeper and as characters. I mean, they put out, you know, a new episode of Dice Shame every week as well. I sort of wonder if he has a certain amount of first thought equals best thought, because there are certainly times when the creative force of the universe is working through you, and those are the blessed times. We hope and pray for those times. The other thing I was going to say is I wonder if some of these big speeches are planned enough in ahead that he writes them when he is inspired, when he brainstorms and comes up with these ideas for the overall trajectory of the season. I wonder if some of these get written in, you know, fits and starts of inspiration rather than maybe on the week that it actually ends up in the episode.
That actually gives me a great segue to mention this to the public audience that's listening to this. I totally think it is probably a combination of both, if I had to guess. And I do think that he must have to have, like any good writer, and I can say that because you do this too, and you're a wonderful writer, have like a notebook or a doc or something that he can just scribble down lines in when he thinks of them, and then he can go back and use them as he finds the ability. Because this chapter was released on February 24th, and then usually it's a week, but actually he dropped the next chapter, which is the last chapter of the full part, 2 days ago as we're recording this on the 28th.
The vote was pretty well one-sided, and even poll chat was pretty quiet. Like, when I'm taking notes to get ready for Autopsy, I scroll through poll chat and, you know, pick up some interesting arguments, and usually I have like a dozen or more. And for this one, I think I have like 6 messages. There wasn't a whole lot of debate in poll chat. It was pretty one-sided.
It was very one-sided. So when I mention that, I want to say that the extra special chapter drop that we got had an additional note tacked on. The reason it was dropped early was not just because the vote was so one-sided, because there's been plenty of those and we don't get early chapter drops.
Yeah.
But because Harlan just said it has been really rough out there. It was very sweet. This chapter was specifically dropped because he saw that he was feeling bad, everyone around him was feeling bad, and it was really hard for people to keep going because the news has just been a cycle of constant tidal waves of shit. And so he dropped the next chapter that we'll be talking about in our next Autopsy episode pretty early because of that, kind of as a sentiment of, here, take this. And it was a wonderful pick-me-up for many, many people. There are, I'm sure now, hundreds of messages of people talking about how needed this was and how much they loved it. It's a great chapter, and I'm excited to give it my full attention and focus next Autopsy. There's so much to say about it.
Oh yeah, and I feel like we need a full calendar week to fully process it, and honestly just like spend some time in that episode, because it's good. It's a good time.
With that being said, I think that Harlan probably has some lines written in his back pocket, and that, you know, sometimes he takes them out when he needs them. But I think this chapter specifically, I think the real world was inspiring him to write some of these lines.
Yeah.
And I think what was going on around him and the hardship he's seeing all over probably influenced a lot of the back and forth here, especially from the perspective of Lilith, who is kind of saying, what is the point? Like, why are you continuing to go on? I love that he felt comfortable enough and did this kindness to us to give this to us a little bit early when it felt right.
Absolutely. I think that Harlan must have had some idea of what was going to happen in 255 when he was setting up Lilith just tearing Arthur down, reminding him of, you know, you had it all and you lost it all, and I could give it back. I could heal Antoine. I could bring Alia back from her slumber and all of this, and, you know, talking about his, like, family and his job and, like, the past that is so far away now.
Yeah.
I think that Harlan must have, regardless of how we answered the vote, had in mind that he wanted to bring Arthur to a really bleak place, and he wanted to bring the listener to a really bleak and insignificant place.
I agree. And I think all of that really culminated in such a wonderful chapter. I want to just mention, like, the fact that we have been given so many hints up to the very last possible moment that we could have been given hints that Arthur was setting a trap. Like, really, this feels so much like Arthur has something that he's planning.
Yeah.
And something he's scheming, because he reinforces in this chapter, as I said, it isn't here for comfort. That, to me, feels so correct. I mean, that's what we're expecting of Arthur all the time. He's clever. We've seen him devise these incredible plans, from loose the caboose to the creative Molotov when he threw the flask.
That he invented before anyone else.
Yes.
Arthur Lester invented the Molotov cocktail. That is canonical history.
He's smart, and we've come to rely on him to always have it figured out, or to figure it out if he doesn't already have a plan. And so it was really set up, I think, for us to think he had an ace up his sleeve, and we were really rooting for him up until the very last minute to do something.
In this chapter, I just love how Lilith keeps harping on the fire, the dying light. You know, it stands no chance against the heavy drops that fall from the heavens. Why light a fire that's sure to die? Even though Arthur says that the fire is not for comfort, it is still felt like a powerful symbol. And I think especially because of what we learned about the fire from Malum, and that it represents Pharaoh and all of that, it's so pointed and poignant that Lilith keeps ragging on Arthur about his pitiful little fire.
Like I said, I think last episode, maybe the episode before even, the fire and the fact that it wasn't there for comfort had reminded me of Malum, and the fact that fire was what called him. And I was like, oh, maybe Malum will come and pop up or something. AK Trash Panda says, I think he's calling Cain with the fire, but I'm ready to be wrong. And that was another thing I was thinking as Lilith kept talking, was that if Arthur is so resistant to her, his only other visible option would be to call Cain. Maybe he wants Cain to come and have a showdown with Lilith right now. You know, that was kind of where my head was at too.
I thought it was really interesting how Lilith brings up how Alia's life has been nothing but suffering and torture and being, brought to the brink of death over and over again, which, that is literally true. But in contrast with how Alia is presented herself as an individual, as a person who still has so much hope, I think that juxtaposition is so important to the message that's being told through chapter 254 and 255.
And you know what? To that point too, somebody pointed out that Lilith's behavior was so childlike. Seer of Time says that was the most petulant thing I have ever seen, that referring to when she kicks the fire out. She was such a child in that moment. But even when she's talking in this chapter about Arthur calls her a murderer, and she's like, the fuck, dude? That's so dumb.
Right.
I'm a god. What do you mean murder? First of all, even I was kind of like, Arthur, she's a god. She's not gonna think of it as murder, honey.
Murder makes it sound so...
It's personal.
Yeah, so human. And it's so not personal for Lilith.
It's not. And I think that is huge in the fact that the way Arthur sees it is still murder, regardless of whether that person or that god has a relationship where it is murder. Because I think to these beings, it's not murder. It's our equivalent to stepping on an ant.
Right.
It's very much like, you think I think of you as something to be murdered. I don't even think of you as that, which is, of course, on another level, wholly horrible in a unique way. But I think that's the point, right? Our insignificance to these beings it cannot be overstated. And that is the chilling horror, the reality of it, of Lovecraftian horror, especially from what I've researched, is that meaninglessness.
Yeah.
And I love how evident it is when Arthur pushes back against her, that she's like, you think I care so much more than I do.
Right.
And that's funny to me.
To me, it was a Tuesday. But not even a Tuesday, because the Tuesdays are beneath Eldritch God's regard.
Very much that moment of, you killed my father. Who are you?
Yeah, right.
I don't know you. So I like that. I also enjoyed the way that Lilith talked about Aaliyah, specifically when Arthur says something about her having a life and murdering her. And Lilith says, a life? You call what she had a life? And then goes on to describe her servitude from the perspective of an outsider, and she seems to say, I freed her. And Arthur says, you did no such thing. And that whole exchange, and it goes on again a little bit more later on, and she says much worse things, which I do think is important to touch on. But that small exchange right there kind of told me everything I needed to hear as far as what that says about, I mean, to me, it would be a good commentary to apply to other things, real situations and concepts. But within the fragment of this show, this fiction that we were building, to me, that was very much like the perspective that gods can have of mortals, where they know better, they know best, and they have a perspective on these lives that makes them think they are worthy of making judgment calls or taking action on like influencing another person or taking action in their lives because they have a perspective that we can't fathom, and they don't see it as a slight. And I do believe that Lilith probably does feel that like she gave Aaliyah a mercy. I don't think she necessarily thinks that like Aaliyah was a good person and she cares about Aaliyah, but I do think that Lilith wouldn't call this an atrocity. She would say that she did something good.
I think that Lilith is pointing out the sort of hypocrisy of like, oh, you value your agency and your free will as you stupid little mortals, and yet you squander it away by not only like sucking your planet dry and being awful to each other, but, you know, look at this woman and the terrible things that the will of men have done upon her. And it really illustrates how Lilith sees the way that humans are and is like, y'all are fucked up. Like, don't come at me for murdering people.
Yeah, to me it was very much a moment of comparison almost. Like, look what you've done to her, and you're gonna tell me that I'm the monster. And Arthur's ability to say, like, you can't put us on the same level. What I'm doing and what individuals do and how that reflects on the masses. And there's so many layers to go through. And this small exchange really hit me. But the other thing that really got me was Antoine being so fragile and emotional, and he falls apart so fast and easy.
Oh my God.
He's trying so hard to be strong, and he recovers quickly. Like, his voice stops wavering and he can talk for a little bit, but then he falls apart all over again. And it made me feel so bad for him.
Yeah, his little wavery, sad voice in this chapter plucked at my heartstrings. It was so heartbreaking, especially knowing that he's getting so sick. They described that his hands are like stained with the blood that he's been coughing up in his sleep. The fact that he hasn't just like curled up in a ball and just like given up, he's still trying to keep going. He's still trying to move. It's incredible that he even can hold it together for like 5 seconds at a time.
Yeah, I think Antoine at this stage, knowing what he knows, probably knew that he could not give up. I think it was way more than just his determination to carry out a duty, but I think it was an understanding of the situation he finds himself in. Yes, I'm saying that with the advantage of having the next chapter already laid out for me, but I think it's important to mention that his reactions here for me, hearing him so fragile, reminded me so much of season 1, episode 1 Arthur, who panicked at everything.
Yeah.
Like, dude couldn't breathe in the first few minutes of Malevolent. He was so freaked out. And John had to calm him down. And when I'm hearing Antoine freak out, I want him to have John in his head to be like, it's okay, chill, go play the piano and maybe you'll feel better.
Well, and in contrast, all throughout this part, Arthur has been like so hard and so quick to frustration and anger. It's been wild to see him in a sustained state like that. Because, I mean, he has flashes of anger, he has a temper, but to see him sustained in this bad mood, I mean, it reminds me almost of, like, season 3 Arthur, you know?
Yeah, I will mention in the Discord right now, Apolloette and AK Trash Panda and Graham and Bird have all been having some really good conversations back and forth about Lilith's relationship to her father and what it means to be her favorite and things like that. And I want to just briefly mention somebody specifically was saying when they were mentioning that comment about Lilith acting so childish. I totally think that a lot of Lilith's sympathy for Aaliyah is definitely how she feels about her own situation with Cain.
I will say, Cain is the Nyarlathotep who killed her father, not necessarily her father. I mean, it's all multiverse and it's all entangled, but I find that distinction interesting, if it's true.
Yeah, if it's true. It's so hard when you talk about multiverses because I don't know if it's been confirmed that Cain is not her Nyarlathotep, or if it's just that he's changed, or if it's just that this is a perspective she has because once he took that distinction, he was a different person to her. So, like, all of that being said, I think that it was very indicative of a parent-child relationship that has gone terribly, terribly wrong on a cosmic scale.
Yeah.
And I can totally see how she was projecting onto Aaliyah a little bit about being kind of a daughter scorned. And I think that it's very interesting if you re-listen to 254 and probably 255 too, with the perspective of imagining that Lilith is seeing herself in a victim position, in a position where she has been slighted by somebody and imprisoned or locked away and now is allowed to be out, and what she wants to do now that she's out. I think it reframes a lot of what she says about Aaliyah, and I also think it reframes a lot about the situation that she's in and how she's talking to Arthur.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that because I thought those were really good chats that are...
Well, there was something that Hydra said earlier that I screenshotted because I didn't want to lose it. But Hydra said, all of the gods basically acting like children is so important to me for reasons I can't accurately articulate. John being essentially raised by Arthur, Yellow being a neglected child metaphor. One of his final moments with John was searching for affection from the parent figure. Lilith kicking over another kid's sandcastle to be petty. Gestures at Cain. And then they also said, there's such a heavy theme of gods being completely unfettered like children, and it's so clever. And I think that's very true. And throughout this part and into the next chapter, the finale for this part, we do see a lot of that childish logic almost, like that simplicity.
Yeah. We have a voice message from Graham that I would like to play.
Yay!
Hello, my name is Graham, and my pronouns are he, him. And I think after this most recent chapter, I and a lot of other people have had a lot of feelings about Aaliyah. Specifically, Aaliyah as a disabled character and the way that Lilith talks about her. Lilith recognizes that Aaliyah has been through hell. She was raised by devils, it seems, that called themselves seraphs, and it wasn't a life she chose. She had her eyes and tongue cut out from her face, and Lilith expresses sympathy for that. But she does so in a way that completely strips Aaliyah of her agency and, ironically, of her humanity. Lilith completely ignores the fact that Aaliyah has expressed hope and belief in good and joy. And she talks about Aaliyah like a dog that needs to be put down. And it's awful. And it's infuriating. But it's awful in a very real way. It's a real sentiment that people hold, that if you're disabled or you've been through trauma, that it would be a mercy to kill you. And I think it's fascinating that Lilith, as this eldritch being, holds this very real opinion. And I think its inclusion in the narrative is very purposeful on Harlan's part, and it's supposed to be awful, and it's supposed to be infuriating. And I think it's very interesting, and I was feeling very passionate about it. That's all.
I don't think Graham feels not passionately about anything to do with Malevolent or the Call of Cthulhu games.
Yeah, I can't imagine Graham ever speaking on anything that he doesn't feel passionate about.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Graham. And you put into words this, like, feeling that I had that I didn't know how to express it. You hit the nail right on the head about how Lilith is discounting Aaliyah's agency and humanity by, saying that she's freeing her from her suffering. And it's like, bitch, did you ask her if she was suffering?
I understand Graham's point, and I do completely agree. I think as somebody who's disabled myself, like, that is very real and true sentiment, and I see it, absolutely. And I think that it is wonderful to see real world issues in fiction and to draw those parallels. I hesitate to say that I want to immediately agree that it was fully intentional and meant to be a direct message from Harlan, but I do agree that this was a great allegory for ableism and the disabled struggle that is very real.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that I want to touch on before we very briefly touch on the vote, because I know that there's not much to say since we were all very much in agreement. I love how John is commanding Arthur to be calm.
Yeah, which is like so fucking rich coming from him. But I do love the character development. We love the maturity. He has grown. He truly is showing that he is there for Arthur.
And I love that it has been a consistent twisting of John being the one who has to calm Arthur down. That has really been a frequent theme in this season out of necessity. I mean, John was left alone when Arthur died. John had to deal with being Arthur's rational thought when the patrons made him very, very sick. John has had to be so much more in control of himself so that he can be strong for Arthur lately. Mm-hmm. And I really like that switch and flip. And then the other thing was that I loved Arthur reinforcing how much it freaks him out not to have answers. We saw very early on in season 1 when he was sitting on the porch in episode 2. It was the missing girl. And John is still playing nice and trying to be that smooth-talking entity. And he's trying not to get impatient and frustrated. And he says, "Arthur, get up. Arthur." And he keeps saying his name over and over again. And then he takes a deep breath and talks really gentle. And he says, "Arthur, why are you sitting on the porch?" And this is what Arthur says in response. I just want to read this out because this is so reminiscent of his freak out in this chapter for me personally.
Yeah.
Arthur says, "There is something moving beyond this world, and I cannot for the life of me grab a hold of what it is. I am so tired of having pieces to a puzzle that I cannot seem to comprehend. Girls taken, cults that seemingly no longer act, missing people, and the ever-present sense of dread on the air. It has no witnessable end, and I have you, a voice in my head, and now a captor of my eyes and arm, guiding, controlling me blindly on this path. I am tired of being a hostage, and I am frustrated, and I am unsure of what to do next. That is why I am going to sit here on this fucking porch." And that Arthur came out so strongly to me here.
Yeah.
And his rage and frustration and not having any answers, and it was so reminiscent to me.
I was amazed that you pulled that from season 1. I was like, wow, yeah, no, reading that quote, I was like, oh, yeah, we have heard this before. And it has been a recurring theme, the being left in the dark and just stumbling around and having these outside forces that are affecting and controlling the greater narrative. And what can you do as one man, especially because the only thing that Antoine can tell Arthur is if someone gets the black stone and uses it with the other stones, it's gonna wake Azathoth and everything will end. That's all he gets. It's well, shit, now I don't know anything except the apocalypse is coming. Cool.
I think that Arthur having to come to grips with not knowing anything is especially hard for him as an investigator. I think his mind is so trained to find answers and to solve problems to the point where it's become his job. It's a job he took on, and he wants to do it. He's good at it. I think he likes to solve problems. And so I think it's even harder for him to grip onto the fact that not only are there answers that he can't get from Antoine, but also even if he gets those answers, he still may not know what to do, but at least he'll have answers. and still nobody will tell him what the fuck is going on.
Right.
And that is a consistent theme for Arthur, is that he panics when he doesn't have answers. He can't be chill about just being in the dark for a little bit longer. He's so determined to find answers. I would pull the quote from every season if I could. I guarantee you there is a point in every season where Arthur gets frustrated that he doesn't have answers specifically. Yeah. And this outburst he had really reminded me of that.
Absolutely. One last-ish thing that I have to say about 254 is we get a switch from the flashback to the present right when Antoine hands over Aaliyah's slate where she's left a note to Arthur. I so badly want to know what it says. I'm so curious. But there was some shit posting on the server that I thought was very good about what could possibly be on Aaliyah's slate. Fish said, John Voice, "Oh, Arthur, it says you just lost the game?"
I did really like that one.
Riot said, "Arthur, it says to ask Antoine about Ligma." And Fish said, "I don't know nothing about Ligma, my lord. Could you be thinking of Bofa?" Luna Maria suggested, "Arthur, you are the stone." And Faye, dear Faye, suggested, "It's the draft of Aaliyah's latest fanfic."
That was the one that stuck so hard in my head, was Faye saying that it was Aaliyah's fanfiction, because for a few nights in a row, I was playing Jackbox Quiplash with malevolent prompts with the patrons in the Discord server, which is something I do sometimes. If that entices you to join, we make custom malevolent prompts and then we all play together. And people kept writing that Aaliyah was a fangirl. It was just constantly writing fan fiction and drawing fan art on her little tablet about the whole party. Which is really good.
I love that. New headcanon accepted. That's great.
Yes, Graham said, "I think I peaked when I said she was drawing her sick persona on her tablet." Oh, good times between the horrors.
Okay, so I do think we should talk about the vote a little bit.
I'm just going to go and read my notes. How about that? I cannot keep learning half-truths. How far he's come with John and his lies. Like the commentary of the fact that Arthur is dealing with John, who has done so much lying to Arthur, and whether or not they've hashed all that out. If she should wake, she needs enough to survive. The fact that they had to pretend that she was going to wake up again. They both knew she wasn't gonna.
I thought it was really sweet that they were like, "Yeah, we should leave her a little like box lunch just in case she wakes up and she's hungry." Damn, y'all, that's
a little bento box for Aaliyah.
That's some real hope. You know what? We love that positivity.
Go ahead and dump a day or two worth of rations just in case Aaliyah wakes up.
Seer of Time says Over the Garden Wall vibes, which I love, and I wrote kind of like her being wrapped up in roots. It gave me sort of like Sleeping Beauty in the tower, you know, surrounded by brambles vibes. And we love those sort of fairy tale themes.
Yes. And then we have Aaliyah deserves a peaceful end, one filled with the song of freedom and a whisper of justice.
Yeah, that was a baller line.
That was very good. That was, first of all, a great line. And second of all, projection much, my queen. Like, ma'am, justice for whomst. Because Aaliyah did not ask to die.
No.
And then we have, you can justify it any way you want, but you are still a murderer. Arthur, you're talking to a god. And then I said, you dig yourselves into the earth like ticks is so fucking baller.
Yeah. Very good.
Everyone thinks they are the hero in their own story. Everyone thinks they're doing the right thing, the correct thing. That was just me thinking about, like, the fact that Lilith really believes she's onto something by killing a disabled woman.
I feel like her desire for the Blackstone and whatever she intends to do with it, I think that she is doing that out of like a sense of justice or duty or something rather than a greedy desire. Whereas I think Cain wants the Blackstone for his own means, his own ends.
I'm sorry, I thought you said his own memes.
Cain's doing it for the memes. This is what I have been saying. I am always saying this.
Cain wants it for his own memes. Okay, The idea of purpose is hollow to its core. You are insignificant. My favorite insignificant was so good.
Very funny. I got a giggle out of that. I thought that was fun.
And the last note I have here is just that I miss Booth John so bad because public, we still don't have him back.
Yeah.
He's been gone the whole part.
He's been gone all month, and we miss him. But also, I love that we were only given one option at the end of the chapter, but when the poll came up, we were given two options. And I think a lot of us were worried that it was going to be reminiscent of the Take the Head Vanguard poll from season 1, where one of the polls regarding Kellen's sister's skull and the Vanguard within was just take the head 3 times. Those were all of the poll options. And so I think a lot of us were expecting the poll to be get the stone or get the stone. So when it was get the stone or stay by the fire, then we had to really kind of put our thinking caps on. But everybody decided very quickly, fuck that, we're not giving her the stone.
Yeah, I will mention the poll for this week was get the stone versus stay by the fire. And the poll, when it closed early, which it usually doesn't do, stood at 317 votes total, with 8% get the stone, which was 30 votes, and stay by the fire, which was 323 votes at 92%. So it was pretty obvious that it was overwhelming. Usually, I mean, we are only ever promised / guaranteed 24 hours of the poll, which this exceeded. So it didn't, quote unquote, break any rules of the game that we're playing here. But normally, he at least gives us a few days to try and flip it if we want to. But we weren't even talking in the polls.
Yeah.
There was nothing to say. We all kind of agreed that we're not going to get the stone.
Honestly, what people were talking most about were theories that we never had the stone on the quest and there's nothing on the map, which I hadn't even really considered until I started reading poll chat last week. And oh man, round of applause for all of you smarties out there who hypothesized that and got some payoff in 255.
Yeah, I was very smug about having said that there was nothing on the map, and then there was nothing on the map. Felt good. We all get a handful of correct predictions if we make enough of them.
Since there was a lot of agreement in poll chat, I did record the one extensive counter argument, which was laid out by KM, longtime fan and not always active in poll chat, but every so often pokes in with some really interesting perspectives. And so I wanted to share their counter argument because everybody was asking, like, who's the, 10 people, 15 people, 30 people that are voting for Get the Stone? Like, what are you thinking? And so KM shared. KM said, I honest to God hadn't even put thought into it. I thought it was obvious. Arthur isn't going to hand her the stone no matter what. It'll need to be pried from him. But the thought of him sitting by the fire, pouting about everything he lost, was simply too foreign to me. I have this image of him standing, bloody but unbowed, facing his enemies directly, holding the dagger and John before the king, holding the stone before Lilith and Cain, and denying them what they wish. Staying by the fire just doesn't have the energy I feel within Arthur at all. I don't see it as defiant, I see it as petulant, a child slamming the door and staying in their room to avoid doing dishes or something. I could have a totally wild read on it all, but I have fun, and that's what matters.
I do really like that perspective because I totally see it, and I also see where it could be interpreted that way if you don't hear the next chapter, or if you only are presented with those two options like we were without any context, really. What Cam is really saying here is actually a type of argument we see a lot in the polls, which is, I'm going to vote for this, but I don't think it's going to happen because that can't possibly happen. Mm-hmm. For example, and I'm going to open my heart and be vulnerable here, I voted for the write-in answer that I voted for because I didn't think it would actually be said in the way that it was written. I mean, that sounds stupid now. Of course it's going to be said exactly as it was written. But at the time I was like, of course Arthur's not going to open his mouth and say the exact lines that are written here.
Right, it's going to have that energy.
It's going to be reworded to fit better. No, that's not how anything works, and I was just being way too hopeful.
Oh yeah. No, we have got to get it through our heads. Don't hold out hope for, it's going to be in the spirit of this option. No, right. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be literally that.
I think that is the safer and smarter way to play a game like this, where you're asking your audience what comes next. If you give them a flowery interpretation of what they're voting for, they're going to argue that you didn't play fair. You kind of have to be be blunt about what they're choosing to do. Now, has that backfired anyway? Of course, and it always will. I'm sure, and that's the risk you take. But I do think this is a really common way of thinking about any argument in the poll, which is Arthur isn't going to hand her the stone no matter what. So I'm going to vote for giving her the stone because I want to see what he does to not do it. Or, for example, something that I would have thought had I come up with that line of reasoning is, I'm going to vote for that because I'm hoping that Arthur addresses us and says, fuck you. Like, maybe he'll have a meta moment, you know?
Yeah. And we still did get a good solid fuck you in the next chapter, so we all win.
Everybody wins, yeah.
I'm still hung up about Everard saying that Aaliyah would speak for him or he would speak through Aaliyah when necessary or important. Given the nonlinear storytelling, I'm half expecting that to have happened already. I mean, we're about to presumably go into the nightmare, but that doesn't mean that we won't get some kind of flashbacks to... No, I don't think that happened, but I'm really hung up on it because it was said and I thought it was important.
I think that it was more Everard saying, like, Aaliyah and I are aligned on what we believe in, and we agree about this, and so she can basically speak for me. Because Arthur doesn't know who the fuck Aaliyah is.
I think I said it on the episode of Autopsy when we were talking about that chapter and that line. I said it was going to be a Janet from The Good Place moment where they use her as a walkie-talkie.
Yes, that's right, because I said it was going to be a Lilo and Stitch moment where she just opens her mouth and his voice comes out.
And I guess I just really wanted that to happen. I wanted there to be some telepathy, or I don't know.
I love the note that you put here. Totally on board with the never had the stone, nothing on the map theory now, given that Arthur rails against the half-truths and lack of information he's being given. Before we go, I did want to say that the themes of constant, unrelenting... The way that Lilith was talking about the rain extinguishing the flames and how it couldn't keep up and all of that reminded me of Charlie, because I think that it's supposed to be kind of a metaphor for the fact that we need to keep the fire alive, that he will come back and he will be there for us. And also, he probably also liked the stars. I know that's not for this chapter, but...
We need to hold a candle for him, if you know what I mean.
Yes, we need to hold a candle for him. Oh man, I'm so excited to talk about Charlie in the next chapter. No, but I just wanted to say that I think that Charlie would be so proud of Arthur for not giving in and for continuing to keep hope alive, because I think Charlie is a big believer in hope, and that he'd be very proud of his best friends, Arthur and John, and that he's probably going to show up any minute now to be cool. And
or torment him in the nightmare. So that'll be fun. Yeah.
Either way, I'm great. Whatever. That's fine.
Evil Charlie voice when?
Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be a part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public autopsy channel in the Invictus Discord, so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Mizra, Nikki, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Now, let's hear from one more Malevolent fan before we finish this week.
Hey, my name is Maya, pronouns she, her. And if there is one thing that Malevolent has taught me, it's that the horror genre is not at all what I thought it was. For the longest time, I couldn't wrap my head around why people enjoyed horror and pursued fear for fun. And considering I scare very easily, I tried to avoid the genre entirely. After my partner convinced me to give Malevolent a try, I started to understand. Horror can be such an empowering way to take feelings or situations we may encounter in the real world and helps us understand and confront them in an imaginary setting. In a weird way, it can make them more digestible. It reminds me of a lyric from Sleeping at Last song, I'll Keep You Safe. Dismiss the invisible by giving it shape. I resonated with this line very deeply as a young artist, so much so that it was my high school yearbook quote, and I feel like it's very applicable to many aspects of horror, especially in Malevolent. And with that understanding, not only have I been able to have such a deep appreciation for this show, but I've also become a lot more open to other works in the horror genre. It's funny to think that after avoiding it for so long, a horror podcast would become something that brought me so much comfort. Hearing Harlan label Malevolent as hope horror was such an excellent way to describe his work, and I hope I can find more content like it.
I'm your host, Queen, and I'll see you next week. The horrors persist, but so do we.